Chances are you've heard or read about a few different research methods. If not, research methods are just the actions you take or the things that you do to gather information for your research question. Most of us have probably heard of one group of methods called quantitative research. All these methods, like polls, surveys, experiments, and even some observations, involve gathering countable data. Then there's quantitative research. This includes observations again, interviews, and analysis. All these things primarily involve describing, summarizing, or otherwise giving a non-numerical picture of reality. Of course, the line between these is a little bit blurry because researchers can count the number of times they observe a certain behavior, and surveys are just a lot of interviews conducted impersonally instead of face-to-face. Next, you may have heard of library research, otherwise known as a literature review. Although that doesn't mean reading novels, it just means you're gathering other people's ideas from published sources like databases, government or private documents, books, newspapers, and so on. This is the kind of research you're probably used to doing. Fewer people outside of the sciences do field research, also known as empirical or primary research. That's because this kind of research makes you get out of the library and forces you to get your hands dirty as you collect information from the world in all its fast-paced messiness. Field research blurs all the lines. You can survey people yourself instead of reading the results of someone else's surveys. You can run your own experiments, polls, observations, and interviews. It's much harder to catch every little thing to be observed or to design good questions and tightly controlled experiments, but it's possible. So that seems like a lot to think about, isn't it? But what if it's not? What if I told you that choosing the right research methods for your project really only involved two steps? Many students don't realize that good research occurs in two stages, preliminary and focused. Preliminary research is pretty informal. It's just supposed to help you create the best, most unique research question that you can. So it's kind of like gathering, like back in the caveman days. You live your normal life, you read and watch your normal things, but you also keep an eye out for questions to ask. And sometimes you take special time out to look for those questions in particular places like books or articles. You're asking yourself, what do I need to know and why? Once you've got a good question, one that matters and can be answered, but hasn't been answered yet, you're ready for the hard part, focused research. Focused research is where you're looking for the answer to your question that you chose. This is more like hunting. You have a better idea of what you want. You just have to figure out where, when, how, and with whom you can get it. This means you have to be very practical about what would be possible and what's not, given the laws of physics and of the land, not to mention your personal schedule, expertise, and equipment budget. If you don't speak Spanish, can't afford an interpreter, and don't know anyone who will do it for free, you probably can't do interviews in Guatemala. But as you think about what methods are possible, you also need to think about which ones would actually get you enough relevant, reliable, and representative information to make a solid case for a thesis. For example, you'd have to poll millions of people to get an accurate picture of what most Americans think. So, as a student, you might not want to use field research for a question about such a huge group. Another example is the way that people can misunderstand survey questions and so give answers that aren't what they meant to say. And even if you interview someone with a PhD, they're human and have biases and blind spots too. Either way, you wouldn't want to interview someone with a PhD in architecture to answer a question about braiding hair, unless they happen to be a master hair braider too. The research methods that you focus on need to fit your life, your abilities, and your question, but they also need to be foolproof enough that you can repeat them over and over, bringing in enough data to represent most of the village, or to feed them using our hunting analogy. So when you're in the preliminary research or gathering stage, you ask, what matters? What doesn't quite add up? What isn't anyone saying that needs to be said? What seems unreliable, uninformed, or biased? And what seems outdated now, thanks to social and technological advances? All of these problems, gaps, and inconsistencies let you know that you're in prime territory to discover something new. As you can tell, preliminary research involves mostly reading and analyzing, making observations, and other qualitative info. In the focused research or hunting stage, though, your questions get a lot more concrete and objective, even numerical. That doesn't mean you have to create or even read quantitative research. It just means you need to be more precise and self-critical as you play Peter Elbow's famous doubting game and believing game with your own methods. At this stage, you should ask some basic reporter's questions, such as, what forms could answers to my question take? Why those forms? Who would have answers and share them with me? Why would they do that? How many of these sources would I need to talk to? Why? How can I get that many answers from them? What materials would we all need in order to stay organized? Where would I gather this info? Online, in person, at a convention center? When can I do this? When should I? As you can see, preliminary research mostly focuses on what questions, while focused research uses all the W's and the H. By working from what you want to know to the specific dates and locations you search for answers, you should move from abstract ideas to concrete actions that you can take to find solid evidence. Of course, that's all forgetting one of the most important questions any writer can ask. What if? What if you discover you don't have the time, the resources, the know-how, or even the interest to answer the question you initially loved? Well, then, change it. Nothing's set in stone until the final draft is published for the world to see. In between, you can narrow or broaden your question, add related ideas, or go in a completely different direction. Research is a messy process, just like hunting and gathering. So if you see something better along the way, don't be afraid to drop your heavy load and grab it.